Welcome to CoexSpace Mental Health Summit. I am Vivian Toussieh, your host. At CoexSpace, we believe the mental health crisis is not only personal, but deeply collective, a sign that our societies have drifted away from balance, presence, and empathy. These questions invite reflection on how we can restore inner and social equilibrium through awareness, connection, and compassionate action. Sujo John, welcome so much again. Thank you for being here in this mental health summit we're doing right now.
Well, great to be with you, and I'm excited about how this will probably help a lot of people, and so excited about what your organization is doing to help people all over the world.
I'm looking forward to this conversation and listening to you about the work you do, how you see the mental health in the society, in the work you do. But first, I want to introduce you for the ones who hasn't known you yet. You're an international motivational speaker and a real humanitarian. Launch into public speaking following your survivor of the terrorist attacks on September 11 in New York at the World Trade Center. And you are a visionary known for being a developer of ideas that impact people in ways that wouldn't be evident without your ability to recognize the need for restoration. Your greatest mission is to act upon the responsibility we bear to take action when we see things going wrong in the world, leaving the world a better place that we found it. And you have been featured in keynote speaker at universities, sporting events, diplomatic and political nerve centers, including NATO, Fortune 500 companies, and community events in America, Europe, Asia, and Africa. You have been featured in national and international media, including National Geographic, BBC, CBC, the Associated Press, the New York Times. So many places, Sujo, you've been, and I feel so honored to be talking to you this time. And I would love to hear the story behind the work you do. Now you have, you can free us doing an outstanding work for humanity. So how you became who you are and what is your mission and what is your motive for doing this?
So, Vivian, you know my personal story. I went through a crazy experience on 9/11, the day that changed the world. So, I would work on the 81st floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. My wife would work on the 71st floor of the South Tower of the World Trade Center. And that day, I came close to dying. You know, the wing of the plane tore through my floor, and I went to the second tower, and the second tower collapses around me. So, I was among the very last to be rescued. So that rescue story of mine, was carried by a lot of media, but also that experience of facing death just made me more aware about the brevity of life and the responsibility that comes when you have that time that God gives you on this earth. So September 12th, the day after 9/11, as I didn't quite understand what had happened or what the future had in store, the only thing I knew that I cannot be living the same way I lived my life before that tragedy. See, life is a summation of stories and experiences. We all have stories. Some of us have got out of a story, some of us are in a story, and some of us we might be thinking, oh, everything is great. The sun is shining on our face, the wind is on our back. But there's a storm, there's a story gathering somewhere. Storm clouds will come your way, and that's the nature of life. And it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor, wealthy or not wealthy, we all have to deal with this. And so when we go through these storms of life or stories of life where life just is intersected, when a curveball comes your way, it's up to us. What do we do with this? Are we going to do something better out of this or are we going to get bitter? And so I chose to do whatever I can to make the world a better place. So a platform for speaking opened up, but then I started traveling the world and I started noticing different problems in the world. And one of the problems I noticed was women who are trafficked and sold, some of them very, very young. And in a very strange way, as a man, I felt something very common with these girls. I realized that they're also physically trapped, just like I was trapped on 9/11. So that was kind of the motivation that went behind me starting a movement called You Can Free Us, which is now in 7 countries. And it was all about fighting this evil of modern slavery. Often people call it human trafficking. That's one cause that I rally with. But I have to premise by saying that all of us, our hearts, could be tugged to a certain cause or something out in the world. All of us can be an agent of change. So I just decided this is my journey, this is my path, and maybe I can raise a voice on it, and others like me can come together and make a difference in this world.
So, Joe, can you explain a little bit of how you do the work, what you see in the field? What is the mental health you find, the conditions around these girls, around the children you find and rescue? And what have been your stories to tell, your successful stories?
So, modern slavery is basically where someone takes someone away, kidnaps them, or forces them to do some things beyond their will. It is one of the greatest violation of human rights. Often the victims are very young. They're very young when someone manipulates them or forcibly, forces them either into sex trade or forced child labor, or even, nowadays if somebody steals your organs in your body, traffics it, that's also considered modern slavery. Or in many cases, in fact, the highest number of victims are the young girls who are forced into marriage. And it happens in different parts of the world. It happens in Asia, it happens in the Middle East, it happens in Africa. That's also considered a modern slavery. Or soldiers in Africa when they're young, children who are forced to fight wars and many civil conflicts, and so they all come under the purview of modern slavery. So our work is focused on victims of sex trafficking and also victims of forced child labor, those two parts. So basically, these girls are promised a better life. Someone will come and say, you can be a model or come with me to this city. I'll give you a job. Or they promise them love. And then these girls fall for it and they go with the man, and then he takes her to another city and sells her into a brothel. And some of the girls that we've rescued or we work with, many of them were sold for very little money, maybe $400, $500, and they're sold when they're very young. The abuse that they go through in these brothels are incredibly hard. In fact, many of them don't know what's going on. They are expecting that the person that brought them will be with them, but they've already done the transaction, left them there, and gone. And so basically, they are broken initially. Like they will cut their hair, they will make them dress in a way that they've never dressed before. And then initially, the first customer is a prize customer for the trafficker, or the madam runs the brothel, because this girl will be a virgin. And so if she's a virgin, there's a higher price on that. And you're talking about a young child. You're not even talking about a lady. And so, you can even imagine the trauma, right? An older man coming to abuse a young girl who's never been in an environment like that. She fights, she tries to resist, but then they get physically violent. They will really torture her and submit her into that. And one after the other, men will come and violate a girl. And in the context of India, where most of our work is, in some of these brothels, the girls are sold for $1.50, $1.50, Vivian. 50 cents goes to the madam, 50 cents to the trafficker and to the pimp or the trafficker, and 50 cents will go to the girl. And these cells in these brothels are some of the hardest you can imagine physical spaces. They're 3 feet by 6 feet with no ventilation. They're dark and it's hot and it feels like hell. The average globally, whether it's in Mexico, Colombia, America, India, these women are forced to see, and this might be a shocking thing for most people who don't know much about this dark world. They're forced to see 30 to 40 men every single night. So if you do the math, there's almost 900 to 1,200 men every single month that will take advantage of a woman. And on an average, a girl survives in the red light district for 15, 20 years. Most of these girls, if they're not rescued, they don't make it past their 45th birthday. So we've done an average math and I figured out the number is astronomical. It's over 250,000 men will come and abuse one woman during her lifetime. It's horrible. So that's the scenario with trafficking. So we have our informers, we have our dummy customers that go into the brothels, we gather video and audio evidence, and we built a case, and then we go with the police and do a big bust and pull these girls out. And then we bring them to our safe houses, and we have some a place called a knowledge center where these girls receive therapy, a skill set, and it's a 2 year program. So they go through that program. Not easy because you're dealing with mental health, and see, these are some of the most broken women in the world. The emotional, physical trauma that they've been through is unimaginable. When someone goes through something, it's a story. It's hard on them, but this level of trauma is incomparable almost. Imagine being separated from your family, kidnapped, kept in dark places, forced to sleep with men. Not only do they take advantage of them sexually, but they also physically very violent. These are some of the lowest of humans that come, and in a way, it's one of the greatest dehumanization that happens. So their trauma is incredible, but they bounce back. And similarly, we also rescue children who are forced to work in conditions that we would never even imagine. They could be working in garbage dumps looking for scrap, or they could be forced to work in factories, paid very little amount of money. And these conditions are very detrimental to their growth. Forced to work 10, 12, 15 hours when they should be in school studying. And so we try to rescue them and rehabilitate them. And the other thing we do is we also go into communities where the children are at the highest risk of being trafficked because of poverty. See, one of the greatest vulnerabilities of victims who fall for this is because of poverty. Poverty is one of the greatest accelerators that brings people to that point where a family member might sell them, or someone might take a risk. They might say yes to some job that otherwise they wouldn't have, but they get lured and they get trapped. And so that's what we get to do. But like I've shared with you on other calls before, Vivian, that although the conditions that they came from are horrible, they bounce back in the most amazing way. And that's the most beautiful part of human beings, that we intrinsically have that capacity to bounce back if the environment is right for us.
Such a powerful story. I want to know more about that, the bouncing back stories. But I just want to mention that I cannot imagine the amount of suffering you've seen, like you were expressing, and the sexual violence and the human trafficking remains such a critical but often invisible in a world because it's so painful to see it. We don't want to relate to the truth, and we're at times of revealing the truth so that we can really work towards freedom and towards a better society. And that's what you do. So I really admire that. And first, I want to know stories about bouncing back so that we can have faith and hope in that sense of humanity, that we can always, no matter what, we can bounce back and rebuild our life if we find people or programs or rescuers like you and your company and your work does for so many, and examples of that humanity.
Yeah, I mean, there are many, many stories, but let me tell you the most recent story that's had such an impact on me. I just got back a couple of weeks ago from India from our project, and we had a beautiful wedding. And the wedding was of a young girl who was, when she was very young, she was sexually abused by her father. Her mother ends up dying, and it's quite possible that the father had murdered the mother. We don't know. He gets remarried, and then the stepmother and her aunt sells her as a young teenage girl into the brothels. She suffered incredibly there. And one day she managed to run out of the brothel on her own. And she gets on the streets, nowhere to go. So she started eating from garbage dumps and garbage cans around. And then she started sleeping under the trailer trucks that were parked on the side of the highways. And even there, men were abusing her. And when the pain there was even worse than in the red light district, she decided to go back into the red light district because that's all the place she knew. She goes back there. Again, her trauma is so incredible there in the red light district. And then that's where we rescued her. And we rescued her out of that hell. She comes, though broken, she made an incredible recovery, and she was just very involved in our work. So we decided to ask her to join us on staff. So she ended up being an amazing staff worker for almost 5 years. And then just 2 weeks ago, she got married and she has no family. So we put our wedding together. And it was just a beautiful experience of seeing someone who's been through such incredible trauma, unimaginable pain, being bouncing back. And so many, many stories like that of girls who have found love again and or have found jobs and have got great jobs and now have family or have found their parents. We've been able to track down their family and they've been reunited with their family. And when a story like this happens, a beautiful ending happens, it just shows all of us that it's all about the one. We might just get carried over with numbers, but sometimes it's all about one. Every human being is so important and so valuable that no treasure of the world, you cannot compromise on that, no matter what it might cost. It's worth it to rescue and bring hope to that one human being. And if you can do that to multiple more, then great. And so that's my encouragement for people. Sometimes you may not be able to make a difference in many lives, but if you can make a difference on one, it's worth it. And imagine if all of us made a difference in one human being, the world would be such a better place to live in.
Unbelievable story. But I know you've seen many of those. And that's why I really wanted for us to listen to those stories to do an emphasis on the capacity of human beings to resilience and how we can be sometimes not in a good place, not being in those situations, and still feeling that we are not empowered or we cannot do it, or that lack of trust in our own power. And I think those are examples of what we really can do. And from that perspective, what do you think are the most misunderstood aspects of humanity that we get to know in society, in children, in the future of people coming from a background?
First of all, we're all emotional human beings, right? And that's important to understand. We have emotions, and that's how we are wired. There's all kinds of emotions. There's emotions of good and bad. Our bodies are wired, our minds, our brain is wired in such a way that if there is a threat to us, we'll feel fear. If there is joy, then there's a smile that comes on your face. If we lose someone or if someone says something negative to us, we feel pain. That's how we are wired. And we cannot escape emotions. If you take away that emotional part of a human being, then we're not humans anymore. We're just an inanimate object. So first of all, to understand that we all have emotions, and that's fair, that's right. But how do we handle those emotions is what matters. Sometimes people don't handle the emotions well. We often hear about people that get very angry, or they cut themselves, or they abuse themselves. They might, it gets to a point where they might, even with how they eat food, they might abuse that or become anorexic. Different ways our bodies can be affected when we handle trauma, anxiety, and fear. So what I encourage people when they go through tough times in life is to take a pause and be in touch with your emotions and understand that you're going through something, but it also to pause and not overreact, but to handle that story in your life in a delicate and tender way. And there are many ways of handling different things in our life. First of all, trying to handle it with yourself, right? You have to come to terms with your emotions, and it's different for different people, so that we can bounce back. Secondly, if the level of that anxiety or emotion is very high, then it's important to talk to someone who we can trust. You cannot talk about everything with anybody out there. And that's something that people have to be aware about. We all, I hope, have someone in our life, maybe that one person or maybe a few people, that we can be raw and real. And we can share with them about anything and everything happening in our life. And I hope that person that you share with is emotionally stronger, can hear you out in a very empathetically way, but also can call you out when you are wrong. If you respect someone, they should have that right to call you out for where you are wrong. And so if we have that person in our life that can actually direct us, can encourage us, motivate us, but maybe also at times can be critical to point to us where we're going wrong, I think that's a great way of safeguarding our future, and how we react to situations. And then if it gets really critical, then there are people who've gone to school, there are people who've gone had experience with that. So see a therapist, see a counselor. There should be no shame and harm seeing one. I've seen therapists, I've seen counselors, and initially I remember with some of the stuff I've been through, I didn't want to talk to anyone. But when I started talking to that person, it felt so free. I felt like, why did it take me so long? So I always tell people, if you're going through something that you cannot handle on your own, or a friend cannot help you in that situation, if it's something critical and severe, talk to someone who's a professional. Unfortunately, what people are now doing is, the other day I was talking to someone, a very successful person, and he told me, I think I may have mentioned it to you on a conversation about this, that he talks to Chat GPT about his problems. And that I'm finding out is very, very common with Gen Z and others who are finding it very hard to handle the emotions. And that's a very dangerous precedent for all of us as humanity, where we're talking to inanimate objects. If I can open up with you, Vivian, you as a human who have also been through your share of struggles in life and problems in life, maybe you've been through something similar. You can help me through your experience, through your knowledge, rather than a software that is just a collection of things out there hashed together. You're more precious than a software having to talk to you, right? You're a human being. You're the highest in all the creation out there. The pinnacle of God's creation is a human being. Nothing bigger, nothing greater than a human being. So it's important for you to get the right help. Because if we don't handle our emotional health well, then it affects everything. It affects our relationships, it affects our work, it affects our future, it affects our health. And often people ignore it. I mean, if you talk to people who deal with cancer, doctors, or any major health crisis, they can easily point out to an emotional thing that went wrong and that wasn't handled well. And then one thing leads to another, it builds up and it manifests into a physical problem. People that have heart problems, we know it's caused by stress, it's caused by people who don't handle the emotions well. Eating disorders, a lot of them are emotions that were not handled well, and so it tends to manifest physically, because human being is a body, spirit, and soul, and that's how we are wired and made up of. And every aspect of that three things in all of us is important, right? And it needs the right care and handling by the right person.
You're making me think, Sujo, on what are the bias of humans right now in society, in groups, that we are seeking for help at AI instead of another human being. You made me think about what is, we feel judge, we feel we need to be in a certain standard. We're putting too much pressure in our kids and teenagers. What do you think are the most common qualities that make a person not seek help in another human being instead of just coming sincerely opening to one, not everybody, like you said, this special person? There's a lot there.
Yeah, that's a great question, Vivian. I think, firstly, it is beyond what you said, and everything that you said, you're absolutely right. People are scared to talk to someone. People feel they have to live up to a certain expectation that society has about them, that family has on them. And then they feel like they're even letting themselves down by acknowledging there is a problem. So those things are there. But one of the reasons why people are going to things like Chat GPT or AI is because I think our society is so insular, that most people are living on an island. They get busy, busy, busy with their work, and then they're by themselves. And when they're by themselves, the only companion that they think they have is their phone. And so, isn't it a tragedy and a travesty that in our society right now, that people don't go out and usually catch up with a friend over coffee, over a dinner? Everything is so structured, and everything is so where people try to get busy and maybe pretend they're busy, but they people like being alone. And it's important to sometimes have alone time. But the tragedy of that is when you're alone and if you're going through something, you may not have people around you. Like if we choose to cut people off out of our life, one day it'll be just you. I've heard recently a couple of stories of people that died, and then it took forever for anyone to find out that they were dead. And there are stories of even people in Hollywood and others who are so successful that that happens to them. And so it's so important for us to live in community, have people in our life, friends, family, neighbors, and to return to what our generations before did, where they didn't really quite do life alone. We cannot live on an island. And if we live on an island, we will not survive well. We are humans. We are created in such a way that we need each other. We all together can, living together can make the world a better place where, one day it might be you that need some support from me, or the other day it could be me. And that kind of transaction is what's missing in our world right now.
I've heard of those stories as well, more recently than other times about, being alone and getting more and more into work and the expectations of society of being a successful man or women instead of building a happy, healthy life, socially, emotionally, and physically as well. But I'm curious to know, how do you think we can start to solve in a way that information we are sharing with our surroundings, with the kids, us as professionals, how we can start to spread this message instead of you need to be this or that. The other day we were doing another interview, and one of the speakers was telling about the over information of trauma and psychological bias and paradigm, and he said that that overview of what we need to be is taking out what we are, because we know so much. One example is being parents. As parents, we know so much of how we need to be and behave. But to be honest, sometimes you're human and you're a mother and you yell at your kids, so you don't put the boundaries you needed to put. And we're afraid of, or we're ashamed of trusting other to tell that, having so much information. So what's taking away our that humanity in this over informed world? But at the same time, we're more connected than ever. That's why we're doing this summit, to know these tools and guidance.
My question is, that's a great, I want to bounce off what you just said towards the end. You said we are more connected as humans than ever. Yes, we might be electronically connected. Our lives merge in many ways across geographical, boundaries. But the question is, do we develop true human connections? And I personally feel that that part is missing. And so I think it takes effort from all of us to model what human connections are all about to the younger generations, and to do that storytelling of someone's two people somewhere got together and how they brought meaning and purpose to each other and to the world. And so, yes, we might be connected, but these human connections are missing. And that's something very sad. It also takes for us to be vulnerable and to be sharing about our stories, about openly about how we found help. Every time you share a story, it just gives hope. Like if I've been somewhere and I've come out of it and someone hears that story, it just gives people hope that they can also beat that struggle or trial in their life. So it takes for all of us to be vulnerable and all of us to take that step of making that human connection. When I talk on this subject and some people are extrovert. I'm an extrovert. I can make friends with anyone. I don't have a problem with it. I remember when I was growing up, I thought I was an introvert. And sometimes people are like, oh, so people ask me if they're around me, how come you always make friends? How can you talk to anyone and everyone? And I'm like, just be nice. You could be in an elevator with someone and say something nice to them, compliment them on something, and conversations start. I have so many friends in my life, and a few of them are very deep friends. It just started with small talk. in small places. And then it built on. So imagine if we get out of that comfort zone that we've created for ourselves and we're bold enough to start human conversations, what that could lead to. People that are listening to us, many of you have missed people that are supposed to be in your life because you didn't, when life brought that person your way, and he could have been your friend, could have been your spouse, could have been your business partner, could have been your customer, your client. You build a wall and you were never open, you were not open to receiving them. So always be open and look for opportunities to build human connections. And if we build those human connections, I think that's where trust develops with true connections. And then you will be opening up. Like, so we're friends. And if you're going through a tough time, 2 minutes in my conversation with you, I'll be able to figure out that you're going through a hard time. And by not being disrespectful, in a respectful way, I can let you know that, hey, sounds like something is off. Is there anything I can do for you? That's how it starts. It just takes an effort, and it's very easy to put a smile on someone's face. And that's kind of my small mission in life, to teach people how to put a smile on someone's face. Say something good about somebody, a stranger, anyone, family member. Say something good. The moment you say something good or you praise them, it will bring a smile on their face. That's how simple it is. And that might be the only time that person may have smiled that entire day. And so it's not complicated. It's small things that can make a difference.
I would love for you to share the story, that the example of that when you got in the elevator and somebody was in a really bad mood and you said something nice. I would love for you to share that story.
Oh yeah, this happened recently where I was in the elevator with my staff, and there was a guy walked into our elevator, and he looked very grumpy. And I looked at his shoes, and I love shoes, and I saw him wearing a nice pair of shoes, and I complimented him on his shoes, and immediately a smile broke loose. His persona just changed, and then we talked from the elevator till I reached my car, and he just wanted to talk more and more, and I had to go. And so it's like I said, that's just an example of maybe he got out of the his room and his spouse or somebody said, "You're not looking good," or he may have had a horrible conversation with someone, or his boss may have said something to him. And just as a stranger, like, we can make a difference in that person's life.
Yeah, and it sounds so simple and yet it's so profound. We're talking about courage to, react differently, that emotionally what's maybe the upburst of energy. Sometimes we see somebody doing something we don't like and we react, and that polarization of or confrontation comes from out of there. So if we make that effort to change the reaction towards that type of energy, it's a start.
Yes.
And it's at home, it's within ourselves, it's with others, and it's moral courage to react differently and to connect. Another thing that came to my mind is right now kids are so much in their phones and they're starting to unlearn what social skills are. So try to open those spaces for kids to socialize, to interact with others, feel the feelings of being with others, and understand and get comfortable at them. So that's another um, tool we need to change in our communities, in our families, in our social network or organizations. And I would like to ask you a last question. What message would you give to somebody who feels powerless or hopeless in a face of a challenge or in a situation or even a day?
No matter what that person is going through, I want to tell you that you can make it. You are a winner. You can come out of that. And usually, three things I tell people that I put to test for myself when I go through something. First of all, no matter where you live somewhere. You might be living in Mexico, in America, you live in a community somewhere. So be grateful for that place where you are in and stay put. Hold on to the roots where you're rooted. Acknowledge that. and you will see people around you that are willing to help you. Number two, uh, if you have friends and family, lean on them when you are going through a storm. Like I said earlier, we cannot live on an island by ourselves. We need each other. So, friends, family, lean on them, and then your faith. Hold on to your faith. And these are just three simple things that anyone can do, and it doesn't cost money. It doesn't cost a big effort. That's where you start with. And so, I've been through. My life has not been easy. I've been through several trials in my life and struggles in my life, and I don't like to look at life, from a rear view mirror. I like to look forward. So I'm going to encourage you, no matter what you're going through, you have a beautiful life ahead of you, and you're not going to be defined by what has happened to you or what people have done to you. You're going to be rewriting the script of your life through your actions and through your determinations to be the best version of yourself.
Sujo John, thank you so much for being here. Looking forward to talk to you again.
Sure. Thank you.